Are you guys afraid of building your own PC? Well, this is the video just for you guys. What's up YouTube? Welcome back to the channel, and today's video is all about building your own PC. Let's start. So guys, before we start this video, I just want to quickly request you all to go and subscribe to our channel if you have already not done so. So it's just gonna take a couple of seconds from your precious time. Just go and hit that subscribe button. It would mean a lot to us. So guys, this video is going to be a three-part series. The first part, which you are watching right now, is about understanding the various components and how to go and procure these components. The second part is all going to be about building the PC itself. And the third part is going to be about optimizing your computer, installing the Windows, installing drivers, installing various softwares that you would require on a daily basis or for monitoring the performance of your PC, and how to optimize your computer for the best possible scenario. So yes guys, without any delay, let's just start looking at the various components that we need to build our computer. So the first component that we require for building our PC is basically a CPU. Now, a CPU is basically manufactured by two main companies. One is the Intel, the other one is the AMD. Now, both these processors are good in their own ways. However, I seriously believe that AMD's processor as of now are a better value for money. And by saying this, by no means I'm saying Intel CPUs are bad. They are good in their own sense. So if you think that you are more inclined towards a certain brand, you can go and buy that processor. It's not necessary that you have to go with what others are saying. Just think, I mean, which brand or the name of which brand actually makes you more comfortable, and you can go and select that brand. Now, once you have decided upon the brand, the next thing would be to decide upon how many cores of processor would you need. Do you need a 4-core processor, a 6-core processor, 8, 10, 12, and so on? Now, the amount of cores that you would need inside your computer or your processor would completely depend upon the kind of workload that you do. So if you are somebody who's just using your computer for just surfing the internet and receiving and sending some emails, so in my opinion, a 4-core processor should be more than enough. If you are somebody who's going to use your computer for what I've just mentioned, plus a little bit of gaming or for some kind of gaming, I think anywhere from 6 core to 8 cores or 10 cores should be a very good proposition. Now, if you go with a processor which at least has 6 cores or above, you can actually also do some kind of professional work inside your system. So end of the day, it would completely depend upon what kind of work are you going to do, and that's how you're going to choose your processor. Now, to make things simple for you guys, in the description of this video, I'm going to list down all the processors which AMD has released recently or which are very common in the market, and also the Intel side. And I'm going to tell you which series or which family of processor is that particular model from, along with listing all the model numbers. And that's going to help you guys out to go and decide upon as to which processor should you buy. So the first component that we need inside our system is basically a CPU. So guys, the next thing that you would want to go and buy is basically a motherboard. Now, a motherboard, what motherboard are you going to buy would completely depend upon the kind of processor that you are going to buy. If you go and buy an Intel processor, then the motherboard that you're going to use again is going to be different. If you're going to go and buy an AMD CPU, again the motherboard that you are going to buy is going to be different. So for example, if you buy Intel's latest processor, which is their 10th gen processor, you would probably want to go and buy a motherboard something like a B460 or maybe a Z490 motherboard. If you go and buy an AMD CPU, the motherboard probably that you would want to go and consider would be a B450 or a B550, which you can see here, or maybe a X570 motherboard, which is on a higher side. Now, in my opinion, if you go and buy an AMD CPU, sticking with a B450 motherboard or a B550 motherboard would make more sense, because X570 is comparatively expensive because it's a premium product. So if you want to buy an AMD CPU, I think you should actually go and buy either B550 or a B450. Now there's a minute difference between these two. B550 is a slightly advanced version of a B450 motherboard, and it's going to give you a little bit of more features, including you'll have a better VRM. So in case at a later stage you decide to overclock your system, you'll have better power delivery to your various components. So guys, to sum up this topic or this part of the video, what I want to tell you guys here is, depending upon the kind of CPU you're going to buy, your motherboard is going to be different. Again, in the description, I'll just mention if you go ahead and buy the latest generation of Intel processors or AMD processors, what would be my recommendation when it comes to buying certain motherboards. So make sure you go and read the description. So guys, the next component that you would want to go and buy for your system is basically the RAM. Now RAM again is a pretty important component of your system. So as you can see here, I have 2 sticks of RAM. Now before you go and buy your RAM, there are 3 parameters that you'll have to keep in your mind while buying a RAM. So the first thing that you'll have to keep in your mind is basically the capacity of the RAM itself, which is actually indicated by various storage capacities like 8 GB, 16 GB or 32 GB. Now in most of the cases, when we are building a system, for a normal user, 16 GB of RAM should be more than enough. Now in my previous video, which was about computer myths, in case you have not seen that video, I'll put a link at the end of this video so that you guys can go and see that as well. Now a lot of people think that adding more RAM to their systems is actually going to increase the speed of their systems. So that is really not true. Your system would require just the right amount of RAM for it to run at its peak potential. Adding any more RAM to your computer is not going to do any good to it, or in any case it's not going to do any bad to it, but then again you would be going and wasting a lot of money by just adding RAM into your system, which your system is not going to actually utilize. So basically the first thing that you're going to do is going to go and consider the amount of RAM that you are going to buy, whether it's 8 GB or 16 GB or 32 GB. Now in my opinion, 16 GB should be something that you should all consider. Now most of these brands which are there in the market, they usually have a kit wherein if you buy a 16 GB kit, it will have 2 8 GB RAMs. Now as you can see here, these are 2 8 GB individual sticks. They are not a kit. So because the kit was not available, I had to buy 2 individual RAMs. Now in your case, if you can buy a kit, that's well and good. If you can't, or if you somehow are not able to manage a kit, then just like me, you can actually go and buy single sticks. So first is basically the capacity of the RAM. The second is basically the speed of the RAM, which is indicated by a certain megahertz frequency like 3000, 3200, 3600. So in my opinion, if you want to go and if you are building a system anywhere from 3000 to 3600 megahertz should be a sweet spot for any processor. And if you're going with an AMD CPU, going ahead with a RAM that is of 3600 megahertz speed should yield you the best results. But that doesn't mean that if you go and buy 3200 megahertz of RAM, you're going to lose up on a lot of things, or your performance would be very bad, or it would be very different from, if you compare it to 3600 megahertz. Well, that's not true. There will be a very marginal difference, which I don't think most of you will ever notice. So for your daily use, sticking with the 3200 megahertz kit or 3200 megahertz RAM should be absolutely fine. The third thing that you want to take care of here is basically the cache latency. Now cache latency is actually indicated by CL16, 14, 17, 18. Now when you are going for a cache latency which is a lower number, which is like say suppose CL14, it's going to perform better than CL16. That's basically the timing of the RAM. The lower the cache latency, the better it is. And the RAM that you see here is basically a cache latency 16 RAM. So if you can manage a CL16 RAM, good enough. CL14 is going to be expensive than a CL16. So if your budget allows and you're able to find something like that, So go ahead and buy that. The next component that you would want to go and buy is basically a graphic card. Now, graphic card is again one of the most important components inside your system, because that's going to actually determine how good your system is going to perform when it comes to playing videos or playing games or doing some kind of editing work. Now, the graphic card that you see here on my table is basically from AMD. Now, for example, if you have actually went ahead and bought an AMD CPU, pairing an AMD GPU is not going to make any difference. This is a myth that a lot of people have in their mind, that if they pair an AMD GPU to an AMD CPU, the performance is going to be better of the graphic card. Well, it just doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether you buy an NVIDIA graphic card or you buy an AMD graphic card. At the end of the day, when you go and buy a graphic card, don't overspend, because in case you have a CPU which is pretty mediocre, or say for example, if I have a CPU which is a 6-core CPU, I would not want to go and buy a graphic card which is a $1,000 or $1,200 graphic card, because it might not perform to its peak potential. I would want to go and buy a graphic card which is in a pretty mediocre range, say for example somewhere from $300 to about $500, and my recommendations for that would be, from the AMD side, I would recommend either 5700 or 5700 XT, and from NVIDIA side, I would like to recommend somewhere like 1660 Ti or maybe 2060 Super or 2070 Super. So these are the graphic cards which actually perform pretty well with the CPU that I had just mentioned. Now, the next component that you want to go and buy for your computer is basically a storage device. Now, a storage device is basically something where you're going to install your Windows and load all your programs. Now, there are three kinds of storage devices in the market. The first one, which is the cheapest one, and just to tell you guys, it is going to be the slowest one, is the HDD. Now, the second fastest is going to be your SSD, which is going to be expensive than your HDD, but then the speeds are going to be completely of a different level when you compare it to a HDD. Now, the next component, which is the M.2 drive, this is going to be the most expensive one, and this is going to have the fastest speed. Now, because this is the most expensive one, what I usually do is I usually take a lower capacity or a lower storage drive, something like this, and I install my Windows onto it, so that my boot times, like when I switch on my computer or switch off my computer, it's pretty fast. So I usually go ahead with the drive something like this, which is of a 250 GB storage, and then I pair it up with a drive like this, where I actually save all my documents, or I kind of install my games, because once your games are loaded, the way you play your games, or when you play your games, the speed of the drive itself is not going to matter a lot. It's going to matter a little bit, but it's not going to matter to the extent that you really scratch your heads when it comes to speed. So basically, the next component which you buy is the storage, and depending upon your budget, you can actually go and decide upon as to what kind of device, what kind of storage do you actually want to go and buy. So the next component that you would want to go and buy for your computer is basically a power supply unit, or a PSU. Now, as the name would suggest, a power supply unit is something which is going to deliver the power to all the components inside your computer. Now, there are three kinds of power supply units which are available in the market as of now. One is a normal power supply, wherein all the cables that come out of the power supply are actually soldered onto, or they are actually attached to the main board of the power supply itself. So in case you are not using some of the cables, you cannot actually detach it. A semi-modular power supply is something wherein only the main cables are actually attached to the main board of the power supply itself, and rest cables can be attached to the power supply using the various sockets behind the power supply as and when required. Or a fully modular power supply is something wherein none of the cables are directly attached to the main board or of the PSU. You can actually, depending upon what kind of cable do you need to connect to certain components, you can actually go take it out of the box and connect to the power supply and then run your certain components. So just keep in mind what kind of power supply are you going to buy. Now besides this, there are other two things which you should actually keep in mind while buying a power supply. The first is actually the power wattage delivery of the power supply itself. Now this would come in 550 watts, 650 watts, 750 watts, 800 watts, 1000 watts, 1200 watts, and going as high as 2000 watts. Now the system that you see behind me here, it actually has a 2000 watt power supply. Even though I have never used 2000 watts, but still I have kind of made my system future proof by having a power supply unit which can deliver up to 2000 watts of power. Now the more the power wattage output of the power supply is, the more expensive it's going to get. So depending upon what kind of components are you going to use, you should buy your power supply unit accordingly. Now in my opinion, anywhere from 650 watts to 850 watts is something which you should actually consider while you are building your system, so as to keep your system future proof in case you want to go and update or upgrade any kind of components later in the future. Now the third thing that you should keep in your mind while buying a power supply unit is basically the rated efficiency of the power supply itself. If you go and see on the internet, a lot of power supplies say 80 plus bronze, 80 plus gold, 80 plus titanium, 80 plus platinum. Now these are all the efficiency curve of the power supply, or these are the efficiency certification that they have received. In my opinion, when you go and buy a power supply which is at least 80 plus gold certified. That way you are going to save some power. That way you could be absolutely sure that the power supply unit that you are buying is kind of efficient, the quality of the power supply is great, and you are not going to have any kind of problems while delivering a certain amount of power to the various components inside your system. So basically, when you go and buy your power supply unit, you need to keep in mind these three things. So the next thing that you would want to go and buy for building yourself a computer is a computer case. Now when you go and buy a computer case, just keep a few things in your mind. Number one is the airflow. Your computer case needs to have a good airflow to kind of get that fresh air inside your computer, cool down your components, and the hot air has to be taken out. So in case your system does not have proper ventilation, it does not have proper airflow, your components might not perform to its peak potential due to the heat that is being generated inside the system and that is being trapped inside the case itself. So make sure that you go and buy a computer case which has an excellent airflow. The second thing you would want to keep in mind is basically the size of the case itself. A lot of people, because they have the space issue, they go and buy extremely small cases which have pretty bad airflow, and in most of the cases the kind of graphic cards or kind of components that they have bought cannot actually fit inside the case. So make sure that you go and buy a case which has a decent size. Now the most common sizes when it comes to buying a computer case is basically a mid tower and a full tower. Now this system that you see behind me, this case actually is a full tower case. It's pretty huge, but on the other hand, the trade-off is that it has got an excellent airflow. Now you can also go with a mid-tower case, because in the market now a lot of these mid-tower cases which have been recently launched in the last 1 or 2 years, they have got excellent airflow. So in the description down below, I'll name a few of these cases which have got excellent airflow, and you may consider them when you are actually going and buying yourself a computer case. So guys, these were the components that are required to build a PC, and I hope this video is going to help you guys out to procure certain components. And make sure you go and read the description so that any doubts that you have had in your mind could get cleared. And if you enjoyed the video, press that like button, share with your friends, share with your family members, and if you have not subscribed to our channel, go and subscribe to our channel and press that bell icon so that you get notified about the other videos that are going to come soon. So guys, with this I end part 1. Part 2 will be coming out soon in the next 2 or 3 days, so stay tuned for that. And it's Sajeev signing off. Stay happy, stay healthy, stay blessed. Bye bye.